Did you happen to listen to episode 119 with Nick Carver?
No, not yet.
Okay. All right. Let me know when you do, because I'm curious about the audio quality on that compared to the other episodes, because I just did everything through Riverside. Mm-hmm. Made my life a lot easier in terms of editing. So it would be nice if, I'm sure the audio quality is fine. But I think it might be worth just putting the money into the Riverside like subscription fee or whatever and make my life a lot easier this year.
Yeah, anything that makes life easier and simplifies the process, it's a good thing. I mean, that's why I took my iPhone as my only camera to Hawaii, because, way easier. But yeah. I just got back 2 days ago. My wife and I, we went to Kaua'i. It is, let's see, the last time I was there, I was in middle school. And I think it was a couple years after they had Hurricane Iniki that went through there, which just devastated the island. And so it was fun to go back just because that perspective of if you visit somewhere as a kid and you have a certain perception of it, and then you go back at when you're older and then you see things from a different perspective.
A little bit taller, and it was,
right? Yeah. It's like, why is that mountain about like 2 feet shorter or whatever? 6
feet shorter. It wasn't like that before.
Yeah. But there's, lots of familiar places, lots of places I had remembered going that it was fun to revisit. And it was a good trip. And I think some people, if they hear a person who's a photographer going to a place like that, they think, oh, they're going to take pictures and stuff. Like, no, that is the last thing I wanted to do. Just brought my iPhone, just brought a GoPro, and it was just meant to be just a relaxing trip. We did a bunch of really good hikes. We did some kayaking, had some days just relaxing on the beach. But it was good. One of the takeaways, and this is something I've heard before, and Kauai is going to be, it's the most relaxed of the islands, of the main islands. It's not a large island, but it still is quite large. Like, I mean, it takes hours to drive if you're going from one end of the road all the way to the end of the road, because the road doesn't go completely around the island. But one of the takeaways is that the people there were genuinely very nice. It was not a fake nice, I have to be nice to you, kind of a thing. And it was really quite a nice change of pace. I mean, San Diego is a fairly laid back city, but I got to tell you, when we were coming home, driving back from the airport to where we live, which is 15, 20-minute drive, it was almost a bit of a culture shock just to see that the way the people were driving here in San Diego compared to what we had experienced in Kauai for almost 2 weeks, where the fastest speed limit on the island is 50 miles an hour, and people, for the most part, fully respect it. You have, the road where it's going 50 miles an hour, then it kind of slows to 35, going through an area kind of like a town and stuff, then kind of goes up to like 45, then 50. And that's what people do. People use turn signals. It's nice. There weren't really, there was one time in the entire time we were there that I heard a person honk a horn, and it may have been on accident. It just going from that to coming back to San Diego, where people were just, weaving through traffic on the freeway on the way back, driving way over the speed limit, just in this sense of like entitlement, kind of like this, I'm putting my own needs ahead of everyone else kind of mentality of like, oh, it doesn't matter what my impact is on those around me, versus, on Kauai, it was so very different in that regard. And so that was very, very nice. And the other thing too, just in terms of observations, I mean, there are some houses on the island that are extremely expensive. But if you're just driving around on the road, you don't see like flaunty cars. There's no, people aren't flaunting their wealth. I almost get the feeling that if a person has a very expensive home on a beach somewhere, that they intentionally will have a pretty normal car. And things get beat up there too, just because of the elements, the salt spray and all that. And there was also this one time that my wife and I were hiking along this beach trail, and the trail goes past this area where there's some stables where there's they do horse rides and stuff. And we're just kind of walking along, nice sunny day. And there's this guy who's kind of walking down the hill. He was one of the locals, and he, out of the corner of my eye, it looks like he was carrying a box of cereal, just like a big old box of cereal. And so we're just kind of walking along. I'm like, I don't know why this guy's got like a big box of cereal there. And he comes closer. He's like, hey guys, you want some crackers? And so it was like a big box of crackers. and like, obviously we didn't know him. He didn't know us. And he's just offering us these crackers on the beach. And I'm like, I mean, I could use a cracker right now. And they were delicious crackers. So, and he gave me like this giant, like put your hands together and fill them up as much as you can full of crackers. If that happens in San Diego, if I'm walking along the beach and a guy comes out of the bushes with a big box of crackers and says, hey, you want some crackers? You're probably not going to accept said crackers, you know?
Yeah. I have a feeling that you get that in San Diego, it's not going to be crackers. You're going to be missing a couple letters off of that.
It's just going to be crack. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But then we're chatting with him, and he said that, you know, he works at the stables. He's worked there basically all his life. He saw that a buddy of his was going fishing nearby, so he's going to go check with him and see how he was doing and stuff. So, and I think that's one of the things where you have a smaller island and people are in closer proximity to each other. They're kind of like all in it together sort of thing. A lot of the beaches that we went to quite a few beaches. It was about 50-50 of locals and then like, you know, tourists like us. And everyone's just chill. They're just relaxed and they're having fun. So it was a very pleasant experience. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was, so there's, when a person goes to, like, if you think like, oh, I'm going to go to Hawaii, you know, I'm going to go to this paradise and these, you know, beaches, the palm trees, all that sort of stuff. And you build up this perception of paradise, which, you know, obviously when it comes to like the marketing of a place, you know, like that, you know, that's what you see, all the images and stuff. There are some things that were a little bit unsettling stuff. So for example, we were staying at a VRBO on, if you think of the island of Kaua'i like a clock, we're at like the 1 or 2 o'clock position on the island. So we're facing kind of north, a little bit east, and we get to the place. It's fantastic. We called it our beach treehouse. So you're like 3 stories up. And also I should mention that the rental car, I had requested something like a Corolla or something, you know, and when we pick up the rental car, they say, well, we're going to upgrade you, because they didn't have any Corolla. So they gave us exactly the sort of car that you'd think of when you think of like the kind of car I would drive. A bright red Dodge Charger. So, yeah.
Yes, I can definitely see you in that.
Totally my style.
Yeah, definitely.
And in order to park at this beach house, you have to, this little one-way, tiny alley road, you kind of pull in, and then you back up, and you have to back between the structural supports of the house, but you also have to back up a hill. That was a little tricky, because like the accelerator on a Dodge Charger, it is much more firm than on the Toyotas I'm used to.
Yeah, it is.
Where it goes from giving it just a little bit of gas to, you know, having the engine really,
all of the gas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that threshold, in order to back up a hill, like a little incline to get between those posts, as soon as your front wheel is on basically level ground, your rear bumper is like a foot or so away from the rear structural support of the house. So it's kind of like this, you know, you give it a little bit of gas, but not too much. And then if you don't give it enough, you kind of roll back down. So I don't know. But we get to the place. It's awesome. It's more of a authentic kind of a Hawaii house where lots of wood on the inside. It's seen some abuse from the elements, and so it's a big challenge to keep up on things. But we walk along this beach, and the first thing we notice, tons of plastic, and it's like it was a little bit shocking how much there was, and it's all for the most part broken up into small pieces. Not quite the microplastics are there; they're mixed into the sand, but the pieces you pick up are, the size of like a fingernail kind of a thing. And most of it is white and blue and green. Those are the colors you see for everything. And they had this sign near where we were saying that with like a little bin so people can take the plastic debris and collect it until the next high tide, more stuff comes in. But the sign said, what you probably won't find is red. Now, there starts out to be a lot of red, but that's what the birds like to eat.
Yeah. Reminds them probably of berries and that kind of thing.
Exactly. Like little, bits of some sort of, sea creatures or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was like this little bit of the shattering of perception of here we are walking along this nice beach, yet there's like this side of the not as good side of humanity there. And I was looking into it, and it said that I think they're saying like 70 to 80% of the ocean plastic is from fishing debris, like the floats and stuff and all kinds of stuff that break up. And other beaches had a lot of that as well. And that's definitely something that was not a thing when I had visited a long time ago. So that part was a little unsettling, but at least there's something you could do where we just go out in the evenings and pick up plastic and put it in the bin. But that was kind of that shattering of the perception of things. But the people were very, very nice. The plastic was a little bit of a surprise. The other surprise was learning about the percentage of the plants that are non-native and invasive. So on the kind of the populated side of the island, if you're to throw out a number of what you would think based on where I'm going with this, what percentage of the plants would you say are non-native and invasive?
I'd probably say more than half.
98%.
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
And learning about the history of, people, all the various groups that have come through the islands and said, hey, let's raise cattle. So they would plant a grass that the cattle would eat. And the cattle would eat that until the grass starts growing a little bit too big for them to eat, which wasn't very long. Then it grows into this like 6-7 foot tall, razor sharp grass that is just takes over the landscape. And then they wanted to plant some trees to serve as a windbreak. So they found a tree from Asia that they planted there.
Mm-hmm.
And those things grow like weeds. They're saying like 14 feet a year.
Wow.
And then they have a tendency for the limbs to break and fall down and cause all kinds of havoc. And so those dominate one side of the island. The other side of the island where it's a really rugged coastline area, they're saying it's flipped. It's like, 98% of the plants are native plants. So that's another thing where it shatters that sense of that perception of paradise when you realize that, at one point this really was, but then people started messing it up, which is kind of a, long history, stuff like that. And one other thing I'll mention, there's another recurring theme that we've talked about in the past. I've mentioned the whole peanut butter thing,
Mm-hmm.
Where the things that are inexpensive and the things that are convenient, that usually comes at the expense of one's health and or the environment. And in this case, another big thing is the sunscreen that you wear there. You really need to wear the mineral-based sunscreen, which is something that ever since the first time that we've been there, my wife and I, we've always worn the right stuff. But it's more difficult to put on because it really just kind of like smears, and it takes a long time to put it, and it's expensive. But it's safe for the coral reefs versus the really cheap stuff you buy, especially the stuff that like sprays out, typically has chemicals that are very bad for the ocean. And so where I'm going with this is this I've based on my past experiences of working with this sunscreen, I know that trying to put it on my arms and legs would be about the same as going to a refrigerator, taking a stick of butter, slicing off a bit, and trying to butter a Sasquatch, which I'm sure there's probably an episode title in there somewhere. It doesn't work. So the solution for that is to basically shave your arms and legs. It just makes life so much easier. So I just want to leave that mental image of my my very smooth, freshly trimmed legs hair and with the sunscreen, because otherwise it's buttering a Sasquatch. So just one little tip to pass on. It definitely helps out with the mineral based sunscreen. And then also the barefoot shoes, they worked really well on the trails. Super muddy, but really, really beautiful. We'll definitely be back. It was great to get to know the island, but just that cultural shock of coming back to San Diego and just seeing that different mentality. So that was definitely a bit of a shock, but it was a good trip. It's good to be back, and now I can kind of get back to some of the other stuff. But what about you? What have you been up to? What's new with you?
Before we get into that, just that whole culture shock has me thinking a little bit. And so I looked up the population of San Diego versus Kaua'i.
Yeah.
74,000 versus 1.4 million.
Yeah.
And you can guess which is which.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I absolutely believe that plays a major role in the nicety of people.
Yeah.
Just the general behavior of people. I'm sure that I won't say I'm positive, but I have a good feeling that if it wasn't for that plastic coming up because of the fishing industry that surrounds the islands and everything, and just general drift from across the various oceans, I'm sure those beaches would be like a paradise as much as they market them as, just because of keeping everything clean and nice. Because when you have a smaller group of people, you tend to care about each other a lot more. And I think that's why you see there's a lot more claims of niceties amongst groups, amongst cities in like the Western, the Midwest in particular in the States, just because the towns are smaller, the populations in general are smaller. People tend to know each other a lot better. And that goes a long way. And it speaks too for the general idea that we're really only meant to be in a tribe of like 150 people at most.
Exactly. And that's something that was in the forefront of my mind when we were there. And the other thing too, so the town where the airport is, that's where they have a Costco there, they have a Target there, they have some of the big box stores. But once you go away from that area to all the other towns, it's all basically mom and pop type businesses. Yeah. So like little restaurants, little shops. And I think in that sense, if a person is working there, I mean, I'm not talking about the business owners. I mean, obviously they're invested in it. But if a person is working for a place like that, you're not working for this big sort of corporate entity, this faceless, nameless people that are somewhere higher up. It's more of like a family sort of operation.
There's a lot more cohesion between people.
Exactly.
More of a tighter knit community. Yeah.
And you'd almost think that with, all of the, divisiveness, and I know that there's always going to be that, but it's not outward in the same way that it is, here in San Diego or other places. And we were there when the fires in Los Angeles started. That was a few days into the trip. And I remember that, there was one day after we'd gone for this, it's about an 8-mile hike to this waterfall, really, really beautiful. And after that hike, we came back and there's this area over in the Hanalei Bay area where there's like these food trucks. And we're just sitting there and we're just waiting for our food. And there was a couple that was next to us and they were talking about the situation with the fires and all that. And that's a whole nother topic. But I mean, for people that aren't aware, it's not just a regular sort of, fire that spreads. I mean, these were absolutely insane. Nothing like that has ever been in those parts of Los Angeles where you have, it's a hurricane force winds fueling this fire. And this couple next to us, they're just complaining about all kinds of things in terms of, oh, who's to blame, this and that. And that was like the only, in that sort of situation with the fires, it's something that is beyond human control. I mean, it's a force to be reckoned with. But these people sitting next to us, they were making it political and just complaining about things. And it was like this snap back to reality in terms of that's the way that, a lot of people are going to react to situations like that. But that's just completely the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, it is.
Especially when something is just that far. I mean, there's literally nothing that can be done short of just people not, living on the planet. So, I mean, there was that little dose we got of that. And it was kind of uncomfortable to hear these people talking about, trying to blame other groups and other, political stuff for that. Meanwhile, I'm looking out at these, gorgeous, rugged green mountains, clouds in the sky. There's literally a rainbow, just hanging out there. And just, this is where people's minds were going in that sort of situation. But it was nice overall to be away from that mentality that, looking for someone else to blame kind of a thing. And so in that sense, it was a vacation from that sort of perspective. But then, as soon as we get back here, you kind of get snapped back into and surrounded by that. So
yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's almost human nature at this point to look for something to blame, to look for some higher being to blame, or just more powerful entity, whatever you want to consider it, whether it be an actual person or whether it be a god or whatever. Nobody wants to take fault for anything. And it just is one way of attempting to rationalize what's going on in the lives. I mean, like you said, this is a whole topic in and of itself that you could spend forever on, and I'm not educated enough on it to really speak much on it. But just looking at like the devastation of these fires is insane. I saw a post from, as of this recording, 6 days ago that Willem Verbeek made on Instagram that, beautiful photographs of an absolutely devastating event. I'll put the link to these in the show notes. And you just look at everything that's going on with this, like the host of the Candid Frame, Ibaranix.
He lost his home.
He lost like everything with his home.
And it's also worth mentioning that he currently has a GoFundMe.
I was just about to say, I'll have a link in the show notes below for those who are able and willing to help support another photographer through these times. I know that there are plenty out there who need help as well. But he's just one that has been on the forefront of my mind. So
and another personal connection. So when I sold my Arca Swiss camera, I sold it to a photographer by the name of Marcus, who lives in Altadena. He also lost his home. So the camera that I sold him was burned in that. Him and his family got out in time and everything. But Marcus, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. His name is on Instagram. His Your Pal Marcus. So Abungen is his last name. Ubungen. But just to like, when you have such a significant event like that, there's going to be a personal connection in one way or another. You're going to know someone, whether it's a podcaster, whether it's a photographer, whether it's just a friend or family member. Someone's going to be affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this one, I think they're saying that between that fire and then the other one more towards the west side of LA, I think it's like north of 10,000 homes destroyed.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely, and that was another thing when I was on the trip, because, here we are in this beautiful beach house. And it's actually the beach we're on is the same one where they filmed the first episode of Gilligan's Island. The houses weren't there at the time. The houses were built in like the 80s or so. But, like this little slice of paradise. But then, a few days into the trip, having, hearing about the fires going on, which, is something where those sort of fires did not, you would have fires, they're common in Southern California. Usually it's a result of these really strong winds, 100 plus mile an hour winds that will blow down power lines, because there's just no way you can build something that can sustain that. It'll snap, poles and stuff. And then those wires will fall down and it'll catch the brush on fire. And then you have these winds that are just funneling the fire through these canyons. And in the past, you'd have it where it would perhaps, affect, some homes nearby. But now, homes that are in these flatlands that are, blocks and blocks and blocks, maybe even miles from, the mountainside, the whole area just like burns like crazy. And so this is constantly getting worse and worse and worse. And I think that neighborhood was probably built in like the 50s or 60s, in about that time. And that's more of like a middle-class neighborhood. But, you have these events getting bigger and bigger as, climate change happens, the winds get stronger. We had a very, very dry, we haven't had rain since May.
Oh, wow. That's crazy to think about.
Yeah. And then last winter we had a ton of rain. And so you have, all the vegetation that grows up. And you'll hear people say that, they should just like clear out the vegetation. I'm like, that's not how it works. The vegetation comes back after a year, and then, over time it gets thicker and thicker, but you can't just clear it out. Then you'd have like massive mudslides whenever there is, any actual rain.
Yeah. Not to mention that's just putting a Band-Aid on the situation. That's not doing anything long-term solution wise.
Yeah. And it's, the only thing you could really do is put all the power lines underground, but that is prohibitively expensive. And it's going to start, regardless. But what I'm getting at is like these disasters are getting worse and worse because of climate change and how things are progressing. And so, when we're in Kaua'i at the beach house and hearing about all the stuff going on, then seeing the plastic on the beach. And at one point I was on my phone and I saw this, I don't know where I was, some sort of social media, whether it was Threads or whatever it was. And they had this picture of Mark Zuckerberg, and he was just kind of like on the street with his wife. And then, you swipe to the next slide, it talked about how he has purchased a large amount of land on Kaua'i.
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
And I looked at it and I'm like, that's right next to us. Like if you look at that picture, you'll see like this little bay there. That's where our house was. So like the hillside, like next to where we were, and then all the flat land on top that we had driven by that same day. Like it's all the land that he bought. And I haven't read the specifics of it, but other than they're talking about how it was obtained in some, not a way that was made the local people happy.
Yeah, there's
just buying these large blocks of land.
From my understanding, there's a lot of that going on there. Specifically, that he's not the only one, that there are a lot of others that are buying up a lot of land, and really not in a way that makes any of the natives there happy about it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're going through so many loops or whatever they're doing, to whatever means they're going through to get this land. The natives can't do anything about it.
Yeah. And so much of the land is just full of all sorts of areas of cultural significance. There's like burial areas like all over.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can just imagine now, us on the beach, plastic washing up, looking at the adjacent hillside, I'm like, all right, well, that's the whole swath of land was bought up by this billionaire. Fires raging in Los Angeles. And it just like, it's hard to have that sense of paradise when you're feeling like you're kind of being encroached on from every direction with like this, what are we doing to this planet and everything. But that contrasted with the fact that the people were so incredibly nice there.
Yeah. Like I said, that just goes to show like how easy it is to politicize something like the Los Angeles fires, though, or to politicize Zuckerberg buying up that land. Like you look at that, some of the things that I've seen online too are a lot of people not understanding or mocking the celebrities who have lost their homes in Los Angeles because of these fires and everything.
Yeah.
And pretty much saying, oh, boo-hoo for you. Like, what is it? A little dent in your 7 homes that you own kind of deal. And because you look at these people, and for the most part, a lot of them don't do any good with their money.
Yeah.
It's just greed. And I think that's really what is at least one of the bigger contributing factors when it comes to this kind of stuff, that these things are happening and people like you and I can do so little to stop them, to prevent them, or even to help. And the people that have the power don't want to use it in a good way. But yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's such a, I think it speaks of what happens when you have far too many people. Mm-hmm. Where, you know, it just, I don't know. It was such an enlightening experience, I will say, going to Kaua'i and just experiencing all of that. And it made it so that when I got home, it gave me a different outlook in a way. Even just stuff like, okay, so there's not a lot of traffic lights in Kaua'i once you get away from like the main areas. And so a lot of times if you're coming in from a side street and you have, you know, this still, 2-lane road that you have to merge into, it can be a little intimidating. You get there and there's all this cross traffic, and then people just stop and let you in. So it's like this, like, just be nice to people, you know? So it makes me definitely want to, be more like that, but back here.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was good, but it was not a escape from reality. It was not a unaffected paradise, but we will be back. It was definitely very good. So it was nice.
Good.
It was nice. Good. Meanwhile, everything's burning back home.
Yeah. Fun times.
So what about you? What have you been up to in this past couple weeks or so?
I've been using my stationary bike quite a bit, which is always good.
Oh, good.
Yes.
That's very good. Have you seen any sort of difference? Have you experienced those sweet endorphins yet? Anything, you know?
No, just pain in my ass. That seat is not comfortable.
Yeah, and also, I can't remember if I'd mentioned this last time, but you'll probably want to look at making sure that everything is like sized properly and set up, because like even being off by a little bit can lead to, like, you know, pain points in areas. Once you get it dialed in, there should be, like, I'm using the standard seat and it's comfortable for me for like 2-hour rides. But if your like seat's a little too high or too low, too forward, too backwards, that can start creating some like pressure points and stuff like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to play around with that then and see. I mean, it's not like excruciating pain or anything. It's just like bicycle seats do not, most people complain about them not being the most comfortable anyway. And maybe that could be the reason behind it, but general design,
you know, little spandex can help with that, you know? Because I do, even on the stationary bike, I do wear the they call them bibs, which is the pants, and they have padding on the butt area so that like it makes it where it's a bit more comfortable. So, you know, there's that as well. You might be a spandex convert. You never know. Maybe after
my trip to Japan, we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens. But I've been doing that as I slowly set up the a home gym situation. I just haven't had the time, or I haven't made the time to go down and work on putting that together. I think I'm missing some bolts or something that I need to find alternatives or replacements for. And, but otherwise I just have to run the cables and that'll be ready to go. So hopefully by the end of this weekend, that'll be good. And I'll have that whole setup nice and prepared for me. Which is so much nicer than having to actually go to the gym. Just being able to go downstairs in the basement, hop on the bike for 45 minutes and read while I'm cycling is something that I've been doing this week, or just watch a couple of YouTube videos, something to keep my mind off of the fact that I'm cycling.
Yeah. Did you get yourself any fans at all?
I have one that I run. It does the trick well enough, at least for now. Temporary solution, but I'll probably get something that's a little bit more powerful or whatever, just to be able to work with that.
Yeah, because that definitely helps. And one's fine, but I don't know. I got 3 now. I might add a 4th one. They're addictive.
Yeah. So besides that, I've just been dreaming of Japan.
And when's that trip going to be again?
So my flight leaves Philadelphia on February 16th.
Okay.
I land in Tokyo on the 17th, and then I'll be there until March 3rd.
Oh, wow.
So about 2 weeks that I'm going to be there. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it's so weird looking at my return flight. I leave Tokyo March 3rd at I think my flight's for about 6 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
And I return home in Philadelphia March 3rd around 7 o'clock at night.
That's going to throw you off.
It is going to be a really rough week when I return to work the next day.
Yeah. Because from what I understand, heading back is the bad direction as far as jet lag and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And when you have such a huge difference, like when we went to Hawaii, it's only a 2-hour time difference this time of year because Hawaii doesn't change time. And the entire time that we were there, my wife and I basically stayed on Pacific time. Like we would get up at our Pacific time. We'd go to bed at our Pacific time. And that worked really well. We'd get up really early. We'd end up going to bed kind of early. But there was something that happened, even though it was only a 2-hour difference. On the final day, we somehow switched to East Coast time. So like we get home and we're just so thrown off. And that's only a 2-hour difference. So yeah, I would, for your trip, yeah, you're going to be thrown for a loop. But what I am curious is, based on my observations of where I went, I'll be very interested to hear your observations based on the amount of time that you spend there, and just, the culture, the experience with the people, the food, everything, and hear whatever sort of experiences you have on that. Because I've heard some things about Japanese culture, the same thing about people being very nice and stuff. But I've also heard that there's kind of an underlying, they're very nice to you, but when are you going home kind of a thing?
Yeah, from my understanding, there's an underlying, I don't want to call it outright racism, but they're very isolated in their culture in terms of, like, I think of Craig Maude, and he writes about this often. They're not very accepting of foreigners being there.
Yeah.
It's not so much that you can't be there and that they won't allow you to live your life in Japan as a white or black individual. It's more that they'll never accept you as their own, no matter how long. Even if you live there your entire life from birth to death, you will never be integrated fully into their society, into their culture.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I do understand, but like you said, it's going to be very interesting to dive into that culture, to experience everything. So I'm going to be landing in Tokyo. I'm going to stay a night there, and then I'm going to take a train over to Western Japan, to Nagano, and that's where I'm going to be staying for the rest of my trip. That's more of where the Japanese Alps are. That's more of the forested, like, natural side. Less people. And all that. So
do you have a feeling for where you're going to be, like the size of the town or city compared to, like, in the US or somewhere?
Nagano's population as of July 1st last year is 365,296.
Okay, that sounds like that will be
a lot better than the 14.14 or 14.18 million of Tokyo. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what kind of experience you have with that, because the culture difference, but the smaller size.
Yeah. And that's really why I want to stay away. Like, I want to experience Tokyo because it's just such a thriving metropolis. Is that the right word? thriving city experience, whatever. It's something that I do want to experience, but knowing me as an individual, I want to be in the quieter sections of Japan. I don't want to be amongst the tourists and amongst the loudness of people. I want to experience Japan as the way that it may have been hundreds of years ago when it wasn't so densely populated.
Yeah.
And really my whole philosophy with this is just quality over quantity. Like, I don't care about seeing a bunch of tourist destinations. I just want to immerse myself in Nagano and the forest surrounding it as much as I possibly can. So yeah,
that's I think that'll be there'll definitely be a lot of topics of conversation following that trip. And also that's about the same time that I should be in Death Valley. So that should work out for our recording schedule.
And I should say too that as part of this, I plan on doing a pop-up newsletter where I will be writing I don't know how long it'll be, probably end up being 2,000 words more each night, sharing my thoughts, my perceptions on this trip, along with some of the photographs that I've taken with the Ricoh, more than likely, and sending that out every night so that it arrives morning of the previous day.
Yeah, there's some weirdness.
East Coast time. Really, that's really weird to think about. But by the time that this episode goes out, I'll have the link and everything ready for it. So I'll put that in the show notes as well for anyone who is interested.
And that'll be a separate sign up than your current one?
Yeah, so with this pop-up newsletter, it's going to be separated from my current monthly newsletter that I'm reviving shortly, I hope. And with the pop-up too, it's you sign up, the 14 days pass by, and the list is going to be deleted. I'm not keeping it. Just a little philosophy that I'm adopting from Craig Mod.
That's cool.
So
yeah, definitely be something to sign up for, and I look forward to all that. So unless you have anything else, it's probably time to get to the artist of the week.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right, so it is my turn this week, and I'm choosing Chris Cummins. On Instagram, he is I am Chris Cummins, and black and white photographer. Works with an 8x10 camera, which is, he's actually using the same camera I have, the Alpinist X, which is a wonderful camera. But he does traditional darkroom work, which is outstanding. A good range of subjects, Yosemite, Death Valley, all kinds of stuff like that. Absolutely beautiful work, ranging from landscapes to some sort of small scene type stuff. There's some really cool man-made stuff in there as well. I'm looking at a photo that he posted on May 1st of 2024, taken in, I believe it's in Bodie. But it's just a view sort of through a busted up old car with bullet holes through it and stuff. And then there's a sort of a wreckage in the background of a house or building of some sort. But just he has such a good eye for black and white and line and texture and shape and form. And it's really cool to see someone doing the whole process analog, with the darkroom and everything else, because that's a pretty big commitment in space and time and resources. And a lot of the work he has, if someone were to tell me like, oh, this was like an Ansel Adams print or something like that, I would believe it, just because he has such a good eye for the stuff and clearly an extremely good skill set is what I'm looking to say in terms of, working with the materials and the controls and everything. So absolutely love his work.
Just scrolling through a little bit now, I don't think that I have really anything useful to add to that, to what you've already said. Wow.
There's also this photo he posted on December 21st. It's a picture of kelp on a beach.
Mm-hmm. I have that one pulled up too.
And there's something about kelp where just you have these rich dark tones, you have these bright highlights, but it's these mid-tones. They're just so, they add so much depth to it. And this photo has such nice range of mid-tones mixed with the dark areas and a little bit of highlights in there as well, where it just makes it's hard to put into words, but it looks really three-dimensional.
The nice thing, or one thing that I really do appreciate that he does with his posts, is including the close-up crops so that you can just really see all that detail that he captures, especially being on 8x10 film.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
And to that note, so he has, I guess the most recent image here. At first I thought it may have been a tagged one by C, or pinned one by C. It's just the most recent one. And it was 6 days ago. It doesn't give me the date, but it's a look through a window in Bodhi. And so you have the inside, which you have all this really nice detail on the shadows. And then you have the outside, which is nice and bright. And just like the mastery of being able to have such a good range of tones and have it make sense for the outside and the inside, and the way that the textures of the wood siding on the building in the background, how it ties in so well to the texture of the interior of the room that you're, looking out this window, and how it's like the kind of the bright and dark opposites yet similarities. There, something like that you cannot really do with color film. There's just not enough range to make it look fine.
Yeah. And honestly, looking at this image in particular too, it's, if you focus too much on like what you can see outside through the window, it becomes almost like a very trippy sort of image, just because of that extreme dynamic range that it would be very, very difficult to match, even I would say with digital.
And have it just play off as like, oh, this is natural, but this also could be like, I could see if this was just like a charcoal drawing or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think also because the buildings are so, especially in the background, the buildings are kind of like slanted a little bit, fallen over a little bit. And then the window opening is nice and straight and, good 90-degree angles on the corners and stuff. But it almost looks like just like a sketch or something like that.
Yeah.
So he does really well both with those photos of the man-made subjects, but then you see some of the other ones, like I mentioned, like the seaweed or other plant details and stuff. And it's just, it's so nice to see such a good ability to work with a wide variety of subjects and show that level of mastery on them.
It's just a shame that he doesn't have a website.
Hopefully in the works.
Hopefully.
I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com. And you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.